Okay, we're good to go. Okay, ready. The recording is all set. So, hi, thanks for joining us today. My name is Carmen Castro. I support the Epicor mobile warehouse product from the product marketing side. And today we have Greg Hislop. He's the CEO from Biscit, and he's going to tell us what's new with EMW, what's coming new with the new ERP 10.2 500 release, which is going to be released next week. So the main update is that mobile warehouse, it's now using the Kinetic design system. So this brings an improved user interface. And Greg, it's going to do a demo and show us how the screens have been updated and if there have been any new features added to it. Remember that you can send your questions at any time using the Q&A box, and we'll answer those at the end of Greg's demo. Okay, Greg, let me pass you the presenter's ball, and you should be good to go.
Thanks, Carmen. Okay, let me just share my screen here.
I can see it.
Okay, cool. Okay, yeah, thanks, Carmen. So the new version of EMW, as Carmen said, it uses the full underlying sort of Kinetic framework. The versions up until now have used the precursor to Kinetic, which was the Epicor mobile framework. So with that, there's been some functionality added. There's been some designs, design layout changes. Hopefully, you like what we've done, and we're obviously continuing to add functionality to the product, which I'm going to go through some of those now. So on the screen there, I've just got my login screen. So if I log in here, very small one, but on this screen, this is the keypad on the device is so small, you'd often type the password in and not get it right, and it wouldn't be able to connect. So now we've got the little icon on the right here, so that you can actually see what the password is. This is just a standard SE image, but so you can actually see what the password is that you're typing rather than hiding it, which is quite handy. So we'll just log in here. So on this next screen, you can see the server URL that we're connecting to. So on the demo image, I'm just connecting to an IP address, but that would typically just be the client server name and the environment name that you're connecting to. And then I get my standard drop-down list for my companies and my sites. And then I can key in my employee ID. So the first thing is that we've now added images to the application. So I've got an image stored against that employee ID in Epicor, so it pulls through on here. So the other place that images is now being used is if I go into a part tracker and scan a part code, you can see the images of the parts now come through on the part tracker. So the plan for this version was just to get the images working, and then probably largely by demand as to where else we might put them. So at the moment they're only sitting on the part tracker. But yeah, that's what we've done with images. Now, in relation to let me just go back here, scan a different one. A couple of parts with images. In relation to the login screen, you notice that I went in and entered in my employee ID. We've also got a setting, so if I go down to settings in the app and go into general, I've got a setting here that locks the user and employee to a one-to-one relationship. So at the moment, you could have multiple users connecting to Epicor, putting that Epicor username and password in as and using the same Epicor username and password, and then different employees. So if I enable this option here and go and click on the little icon of the image and actually log out, just to show you, if I want to log out, what that behavior is. If I log in this time with that setting turned on, you'll notice that it's automatically put my employee ID in of 100. It still presents me with this screen so that I can still select my company and my site, but the employee ID field is grayed out, and that's because that's the employee ID that's been associated with that Epicor user account in the user security maintenance screen. So you can sort of lock that down so that it only allows one employee per Epicor login. So I'm just going to change that back just because I often log in as different users, which is helpful. So the next thing I wanted to touch on while we're in settings is we've added a roaming setting. So in the previous versions of EMW, all of those settings, like those ones that I was just in, were sticky to a device. So we didn't have any way for one Android scanner to essentially communicate with another one. We had nowhere in the Epicor application to store those settings. Keeping in mind that the application is still essentially a zero footprint install. You can download it from the Play Store and punch in your URL, and there's no sort of setup required. Once you punch in your URL, you're connected. Within a minute, you could be processing a PO or doing an inventory adjustment. So we've added what we call roaming settings. So mine is already set, but now these settings can only be set by a security manager. So if you're a security manager, you should get an option for a list of UD tables that are available in your system. And I believe it will remove any UD tables from the list that already has data in them. So it's specifically only looking for blank UD tables, so we're not treading on any other customizations. And you just basically select a UD table setting, a UD table which stores those settings. So it stores the settings then at a company level, and then when the users log in, firstly, any device they pick up will have consistent settings on it. And secondly, it doesn't give the users the ability to change those settings because they're driving from a company setting. Now that's what we've got in the app at the moment. There's plans to expand that. At the moment, it doesn't. It includes settings, I think, and maybe favorites, but it doesn't include things like material query. Material queue queries and things like that. So we'll be sort of expanding on that functionality now that we've got that base functionality in there. So yeah, so if I, because I've got company level settings, if I log in as a user, then a lot of these settings are disabled. Now, there's one or two that are employee, available to employees that aren't sort of grayed out per se, but the majority of them are set at a company level. Okay, so if I just go into shipping and customer shipment, just to talk about some of the design changes. If I just quickly create a new pack number here and select an order. I just want to populate the screen with some data. Let's just select this one here. And let's get rid of that keyboard. So in terms of design changes from the last version, you will notice that our tabs are moved up to the top of the screen. I find that helpful rather than constantly looking at the bottom for where I'm navigating. So I'm currently sitting on the pack line tab. And then what we've removed the little bubble that we used to have down here in the right-hand corner. So what you'll see now is we refer to this bar across the bottom as the primary tasks bar. And the beauty of that is, certainly with things like save, that is always obviously a primary task on a form, is you don't have to hit the bubble to open a menu to then select save. Save is always available. So if I just go into, say, this part number field and pull up an available part and put a quantity in, you'll notice that my save is now immediately available from that screen without having to essentially tap twice. So the concept is that's our primary tasks. And obviously there's some of the busy forms don't have enough room, and that's, I guess, one of the biggest challenges managing or building a mobile app is dealing with the amount of screen real estate. So we refer to that as our primary tasks. And then up in the top right-hand corner here, you'll see these three little buttons. So that's what we now refer to as our secondary functions on a page. So there's a number of places where that's come in. And yeah, it's really about sort of trying to manage the real estate the best way we can. So we're sort of trying to identify what we think are the primary functions on a page that are used the majority of time, and other actions that, effectively you can manage this process without going into any of these. But if you need extra information or additional actions, they'll typically be under that little icon. A couple of other things while we're on this page is you'll notice that every field has a little X next to it. So I think in the previous version you had to backspace over the fields if you wanted to remove the value. But every field now has got this little X. So I can clear if I hit the little X, for example, on the bin number, it clears it out, and I'll scroll up. And it's ready to enter a new bin number. Having said that, is that we've also sort of added some usability, I guess, just in these drop-down lists for things like warehouses and bin numbers. You'll notice if I click on this filter button for bin number, it's actually only showing me, because I'm on a pack out screen here, but it's only showing me the valid bins, not all the bins, and it's showing me the quantity on hand in each of those bins. Similarly, so let me just select one of those. Let me select the main one. Similarly, if I clear the warehouse out and I tap on the warehouse selection, I get the same sort of information. I get only the 3 warehouses that are holding stock and the quantity that they're holding. Let me just put a value back in there. Let's go this one. Also the quantity fields. If I tap into a quantity field, doesn't matter whether it's got a value or not. So you can see down here I've got 0 value. I've also got some information across the bottom here about what the required quantities are and on-hand quantities. But if I tap on the quantity field, you'll see it highlights the number automatically, again, so that you're typing over the number every time. So I'll put in 5 and return. And as soon as I navigate away from it and then tap in it, I can, sorry, must be just when it's a 0. So when I've got a 0 quantity, clear the quantity. Yeah, then it highlights it so you don't have to backspace over the 0. So just some little sort of changes like that. What else? not obvious on this page, but just one of the points that I had is that we've now removed the reliance from the BAQs or for BAQs, so everything's running purely through the REST APIs. I think there's one exception, and that is to do with the roaming settings, but that BAQ is essentially installed or imported by the app itself when it's installed. So the app itself, none of these lists are now populated by BAQs. So if there's any sort of change in the schema from Epicor, it's sort of unrelated and won't affect the functionality of the application. Up on the right hamburger menu here, what we've also added is what we refer to as scanner subscriptions. So it's telling us, it's giving us information about what the system is expecting on this particular form. So the default barcode scan for this particular form is to scan a part or a part UOM. I've also configured, and I'll go into this later, but I've also configured a multi-barcode scan combination for this form. There's only a couple of forms that have this, but this is one of them, and I'll go through that a little bit later. But then it's also identifies all of the input fields that you can tap on and get into focus and read a barcode into. So it just creates a bit more visibility when you're looking at a form and wondering what sort of barcodes can I scan in. So the default scan is when there's nothing in focus on that page. The default barcode scan in this case is a part or a part UOM, and then all those other fields are scannable as well. So that's quite helpful sometimes. I think in terms of sort of design changes, that was probably about it. Other than filters, which I'm going to navigate out of this form and over to receiving, only because there's what we call a multi-layered filter option on PO receipts. So if I go into my PO receipts, and I've got my my standard functionality that was in the previous version for PO number, I can just hit the list view and call up a list of open POs. But now you'll notice on this screen, I've got a filter option. So these filter options appear on a number of screens. It's blue with a white funnel because it means there's a filter actually set. So if we tap on that button, excuse me, the status or the option that's actually set on this particular form is the order status. So the order status at the moment is set to open, but let's say if we wanted to change it to open and approved. Now, the multi-layer filter option, one of the challenges that we've got with the REST APIs is that, for example, on a PO search form, the only field that is searchable is the supplier num, which is not visible in the Epicor application. So typically users don't know what supplier number for a supplier is. They know what the supplier ID is or the supplier name. So the supplier num is kind of what drives the form. But if I click on now the little list view for supplier number, I'm now able to search for supplier where I've got a supplier ID, a num, and a name. So then you'll notice that on this level, I've got a funnel. This one is white with a blue funnel because there's no filters set. So if I go in here, I can now type in, for example, under the supplier name, type in just partial filters or partial searches, so ADD for our famous customer Addison, and then choose filter, and it returns my supplier ID list by that filter. So I then select that supplier and it returns their supplier number to that main form, which is what we have to filter that main form by. It's the only option we've got. So it just adds a little bit of flexibility. So if I now go filter, now I'm looking at all the open POs just for Addison. So there's lots of places that those filters have been added into the system, and it will continue to grow. I think the options on some of those filter screens will continue to grow as the application gets more widely used and more requests for filters get created. Okay, so that's kind of about it at a high level for just sort of the concept changes and application changes. Let's sort of move into more sort of functionality now. First one is that we've now created an ability to do a mass receipt, which we didn't have in the previous version. So if we go into mass receipt, I'm just going to load up a list of POs. And I'll just grab the top one in the list here. Enter my pack slip number, which let's put PS4535. Click on my mass receipt button, and that one's already closed. Oh, that's probably because I left. Let me see if I've got another one. Let me just quickly, I was testing a few things last night. I thought I left that open. But let me just check. It's part name. It's got a few screens open here. Just quickly duplicate a PO. Actions, KPO. That should do us. We'll just pull up that list again. Let's clear these up. There's our 4537. Put a pack slip in for this one. Yes. 537. Mass receipt. Purchase of these. Oh. What's going on there? 4537. Yes. Let's see. It's interesting. I'm not sure what the issue there is. Let me try one of these. Look at that. Sorry about that, guys. Sure what's going on there. Yeah, I'll come back to that, but it comes up with a screen that is, let me just quickly try again, see if I've got something in here that is, let's quickly create a new one. Let's pick a supplier. I have an issue, and I've not seen an issue with this form before, so that's quite strange. Let's just need to relaunch the page just in case. Receiving receipt. Yep, 45. Yep, 38. Pack slip number in. Okay, not sure. I have to see what that issue was. But so displays my lines, and sorry, I'm in PR receipt, not mass receipt. Right again. 538. Here we go. So yeah, so here's my two lines. So similar to the standard functionality in Epicor, I can come along and go get all, select set all, receive all, and then process. So that's, I'm not sure what happened with that. The first one, why I didn't think it was available for mass receipt. Okay, so the next one I had on my list is proof of delivery. So let me go into settings first. And under these settings now, there's some settings around proof of delivery, which are just the image quality. Obviously, dependent on the image quality is the size of the file. The file transfer mode, which just determines where the file is stored in Epicor. The file transfer server path prefix, the document type, I've just created one called pod, and the output file type. So once these settings are set, if we just navigate to, if we navigate to proof of delivery and into here and call up a list of pack numbers, I'll just grab one of these shipped ones, 273. I can now, against that pack, store both signatures and pictures. So if I click on signature and sign my initials on this glass and say OK, we just go to the receipt in Epicor. Let's clear the form. And pack ID 273. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, not receipt entry, customer shipment. ID, so customer shipment there. Put up on the other screen. No, so I've already got it loaded, so you can see that there was no attachments. Now if I refresh, let's go create an attachment for proof of delivery, which comes from that document type, and click on that file, and there's that signature that I just put in. So similarly, I can, let's just close that. Similarly, I can add a picture. The device I'm running, it's actually got a trigger handle on it, so the camera's covered over. So it's all black, but so let me just get out of that one and just, so I can also take photos on the device and browse the files on the device and attach it just like I can with a live picture. So if I just go attach, there's an image of a cup that I had sitting at my desk yesterday. So I can just select that and say OK. And if I, oh sorry, I had this screen covered up. I'll do that again. But here, let me just do that again. So what I went into the picture tab at the bottom here, and because I've got it covered up with the trigger handle, that just allows me to take a photo then and there. So I'll just close that and go to the attach file screen, and I can just attach an image that's been taken previously, the same way as I can with a live photo. So if I now go back onto this customer shipment entry screen and hit refresh, I should actually have two instances of that same picture because I just added it twice. And there's that image. So the plan with that, certainly the picture functionality is to, again, this version was just about getting that functionality working, that concept working. I think there's almost an endless number of places that that could be useful in the app. And yeah, that's probably largely going to be driven by demand as to where we put it next. But now that we've got the functionality working, it shouldn't be too much effort to roll it out into various other forms as attachments against other transactions. What was next? So with cycle counting, there's a couple of, the one thing I need to point out about just going back to the proof of delivery is not yet available when you're connected to a cloud system. So it is in progress. We're working with Mark Kaminsky and Omar, and part of the challenge we've got on a cloud is having the access rights to be able to pass that file back to a cloud server. So I believe they've achieved something similar with the time and expense app. So they're looking at basically allowing us to utilize the same sort of functionality, I guess, as the way they've managed it in that app. So it's if you're connected to a cloud environment, that proof of delivery menu item should not be visible on the main menu there. Oops. On the main menu there, if you're connected to a cloud environment. So until we get that access into the cloud server to be able to pass those files back. Onto cycle counts. So there was an element of this, what we refer to as cycle count extension on the device in the previous version, but we've actually branched it out to a separate screen. There's a couple of settings that relate to cycle counts. So let me just jump in here under the general settings. These bottom two options here is whether you want to confirm existing tags when generating a new tag in cycle count. So in the new cycle count functionality, as opposed to in Epicor when you generate, for example, a physical stock tape, it asks you have to pre-populate with how many blank tags you want, and then void the blank tags. Now in the handheld, you can just create a new tag on the fly, so you don't have to worry about how many am I going to need. What that setting there does is basically says if I'm going to request that I'm going to scan, request a new tag, do I want to prompt the user as to whether there's any returned tags for that combination? So what I mean by that is if I've scanned my bin and my part and I've already put a quantity of 2 in, it's not coming up on the list because that tag has been essentially returned. If I then scan that same combination again and it doesn't find a tag, with that setting turned on, it will prompt you, and we'll have a look at this in a minute, but it'll prompt you with a question of, do you know you've already returned a tag with that same combination? You know, as in, have you just found more stock? So do you want to change the existing tag, or do you genuinely want to create a new tag? And the other one is just an ability to allow users to void the blank tags. So going back to the cycle count functionality, oops, past it, sorry, inventory. If I go into the normal cycle count form, I select my cycle count and I'm presented with a tag field. Obviously, the concept is traditionally in Epicor is you print the tags, which prints the barcodes. You'd scan it in. I guess this form here gives you a little bit of flexibility in that you can actually select the tags from a list with one of the filter options. There's a couple of filters available there, or you can, if you have printed the tags, you can scan it into that field. But if we go to the cycle count extension form, there's my cycle counting. It's in fact a full physical. Now I did find an issue on this form yesterday on the version that I'm running on this device. So I need to get it fixed. It'll be fixed in the next couple of days. But the concept here is I've still got my ability to load a tag or scan a tag in using this top field here. So there's all my open tags, just like we saw on the previous screen. But now what I've got is I've got this field called scan type. So the first thing it's asking me is for, or I'm telling the application that I'm going to scan a bin number. So I come along and scan a bin number, and it populates my bin number. Now, what's not happening, so I think we've got a little issue, is that as I then build out this list, so once I've scanned that bin, I then come into my scan type and say, okay, I'm now scanning a part number. So I now scan my part number, and in that case, the list below here should be filtering, and it's not. It's just to do with it's just to do with a focus event. I accidentally tapped the wrong button, sorry. It's to do with a focus event, so by moving that focus, I actually tapped the wrong one. It's filtered it. So what it's doing is it's finding that combination of the bin number that I read in the part, finding the one tag that relates to it. Concept is now I tap that tag, which opens it. I can scan my quantity, or I can enter my quantity and save it. It returns back to this screen, and I simply, because my scan type field is still set to part number, I then just scan my next part. You'll see my part number field updated. And again, if it should be automatically filtering those results, but if I just force that by maybe tapping into this security field, you'll notice then it's retrieved that one result for the next one. So when you think about that, I tell the system I'm going to scan a bin. I put the bin in, that bin stays static. Now I set it to say I'm now scanning parts. I scan my part, it finds the tag, I open the tag, I either scan or enter the quantity, I save the record, it returns me back to this screen, and I simply scan the next part. It finds the tag, I open the tag, I enter the quantity, I save it, it returns me back to this screen, I scan the part. If I've got a bin that holds multiple parts, I'm now essentially doing my stock take or my cycle count for everything by bin number, by part. But that hierarchy, I guess, continues. So if I've then scanned a bin number, I've scanned a part, and let's say for argument's sake, that part is now, there's multiple serial numbers or multiple lots. My records that are getting returned is still more than one record, right? So I've still got multiple. So I can scroll through the list and find the one I want and select it, or I can say, well, I've scanned my bin, I've scanned my part. Now I'm going to start scanning lot numbers. I scan my lot number, it populates my lot number field, which in theory should be unique. I've now got my one result. I select the record, enter my quantity, save it, it comes back, I simply scan the next lot. I don't have to touch any, I don't have to navigate through any forms because it's still sitting on my scan type of lot number. So I keep doing that until such times as I finish scanning all the lots for that part. I can then go back and say, I'm now scanning part, and scan the next part. Or I go back one step further, I'm now scanning a new bin. So tell the system using the scan type field that I'm scanning a new bin, and it's kind of hierarchical in that way, and is telling me that, and it's finding the tags for me. So I don't know how many of you have heard stories about customers that need to want to do cycle counts with barcodes. I was at a site 6 months or so ago, and they generated their count tag sheets, and it printed 4,500 pages to print the barcodes. So with this mechanism, there's no need to print those tags anymore. So just on the generate tags, so let me just set this back to my part number field, clear my part number, and scan in one that I don't have a barcode. Let me just quickly, I think there's a, just want to scan one that's already been scanned. So I'm going to scan in a part. I force that focus event, and it's retrieved no records. So I've got my generate tag button at the bottom here. So I can say generate tag. Now, because I had that setting turned on, it's telling me that tag number 4.1 for bin 101 and part 1032FW has already been returned. And it had a quantity of 3 in it. You know, have you just found some more stock? Do you want to genuinely create a new tag, which I can do just with the confirm new tag option down the bottom here. Otherwise, I can actually select that returned tag and say, actually, yes, I did find it, and it's actually got a quantity of 4, not 3. I found another item sitting at the back of the second shelf. Or you could choose to create a second tag. So, yeah, so that's the cycle count side of things. I think all the rest of the functionality around that is standard and was in the previous versions. The next thing I wanted to do was look at pack out. So we've added some functionality to pack out. Again, I'll just go down to the settings. And we'll go to the shipping button. So we already had a setting on the picking on the device that allows you to not overpick. The standard Epicor UI will allow you to overpick an item. So we've added a similar thing for pack out, but we've actually kind of gone one step further that do you want to allow overpacking or do you want to stop it? No, I don't want any setting. I want a warning or I want to stop. So that's one thing we've added. Now the next thing that we've added is this multi-scan barcode, which I alluded to at the start. And if I drop down this list here, there's a number of options that you can choose from, various combinations depending on what you're doing as a business. I've just got this one selected. You'll notice in every one of them at the moment, part is in every one of them and has a little asterisk next to it. That is because it's required in every scan if you want to use this functionality. We're actually looking at, and the concept is that the Epicor API needs part to be passed back. But ultimately, we're looking at building another one that, so long as the barcode you're reading in is enough to identify a unique record in the list, it may not need part in the future, but at the moment it does. So with the understanding of those couple of settings, and there's some other ones that just allow you to auto turn on the quantity checkbox and auto save the transaction when the auto quantity is on, just standard sort of functionality on the pack out. If we navigate to the shipping and customer shipment, and we generate a new pack ID, and then we go to the pack out tab, and we'll grab our order. I think we're going to use this 75. We'll select the order. Just get rid of that keypad. And on this screen now, because of that configuration, I'll come back to that. It was in the previous version, but you can define a character separator for concatenating barcodes. So that's essentially the same functionality that this uses. So I've got a barcode here that when I scan it, has identified enough information about the individual item, and you can see on that screen, it's reading the part number, the line number, the release, the warehouse, the bin, and it's basically just asking me for the quantity. And you can see at the bottom it's expecting 10, so we'll put 10 in. There's my save button. But what was interesting is that barcode was only the part number and the order number. Okay, now those two pieces of information, because that part on that order was unique, was enough to find that record. Now, even though that combination that we specified was, I think, 5 values, part, order, line, release, I can leave those others blank in that barcode. And if I just quickly show you the barcodes that I was scanning, let's make this a bit bigger. That's okay. Let me just drag this over. So the barcode that I just scanned was this barcode here, which was simply just the part number and the order number. Now, obviously, you can imagine with those five values all concatenated together, being the part, the order, the release, the line, the release. In fact, I think the one I had job in it. Then that barcode can get quite long. So the second one here, so I'm just going to save that. Oops, sorry. I'll minimize that. I just saved that 10 quantity that I put in there. Let me just try and get this separated on the same screen. But for the second item, you can see I've specified more information. I mean, I've specified more information on this one because I've actually got multiple releases. So if I don't specify down to the release level, it's not going to know which record. But also the fact that barcode is going to get longer, I've put it into so the barcode doesn't get too long from my label. I've put it into a QR code, and if I scan that, then it reads that data in. Now, we had a client that was that's using this because they have, when they manufacture something, they put a label on the part that they're manufacturing, which makes it unique, and that barcode is an element of that combination. It's the order number, the line number, the release number, and in their case, the job number. So then when they're doing the pack out, they can just scan the barcode on the item, and it has everything in that one barcode to identify what that item is, to be able to add it to the shipment. So that's and even though we've specified the 5 values, we can leave subsequent values empty, like this one. So I've just put the part and the order number. I don't, even though in theory I've got a slash and a value for the line number, and a slash and a value for the release number, and then a job number. I don't know, 3, 4, 3, 7. That will work because it works in a hierarchical order, that as soon as it's got enough information down the line, you can leave the rest of them empty. You can also, in fact, I should have left that there. You can also have a combination where if I've got the order number, the line number, the release number, and the job number, I could actually build that barcode if I needed the job, and that was enough to make it unique. I didn't need any of the 3 values in the middle, because I always need part. I could actually create that barcode that would look like that. Okay, so the part, blank order number, blank line number, blank release number, and just the job number. And that would fill in enough of those fields in that order to identify that record. So yeah, so that's how that multi-barcode stuff works. The other, so that just if I just go back to where that in our settings, where you define the user-defined character separator, which is on this screen here. So you can dividing character for multi-barcodes. just quickly while I'm on this screen, this button here is new. That's because I'm running on a Zebra device. Zebra device uses a data wedge. So previously you needed to create a data wedge profile for the scanning to work on a Zebra device. Now the application comes with that profile or a file for that profile created. So if you're on if you won't see this button if you're on a Honeywell device, but if you're on a Zebra device, you can then just hit import file and it'll import the file into the data wedge profile that creates the profile for you. So previous versions there was a setup guide for how to create that profile manually if you're on a Zebra device, and now it's automated. You can do it from within inside the application. Okay, what else do we have? Okay, a fairly big one is we've added our first level of ability to customize the application. Now, there are restrictions with this, but I think it's a good first step. And bigger picture, because we're now in the Kinetic framework, coming from Epicor Mobile framework, now onto the Kinetic framework, most of you are probably aware that the Kinetic team are working on the ability to add customizations and personalizations to the framework. We are expecting once that functionality becomes available that we will be able to utilize that functionality. But in the meantime, we've built a level of flexibility into the product that we're able to do at the moment without too much effort in the overall scheme of things while we're waiting for that functionality to become available. So if I navigate into I think my PO receipt screen, now I added a couple of fields last night and it was quite late, so I added ones that didn't necessarily need to be there because they're already on the form, but it still shows the example. So if I go in here and select all orders, and we'll grab this 529 order. Let's back to I'll open one of these. Exit. That example. So there would be orders in here that are raised against the job, but this screen used to go down to here. But when this PO is for a job, across the top here, you'll get the job, the assembly, and the sequence number. And that's what I added. So I added 2 new fields to the form, and these can be any fields inside the data set. So I added job number and job sequence. Now, I'll show you a couple of screens in Epicor in a minute, but basically these 2 fields, this one's not for a job. These can be any fields that exist in the data set that aren't currently displayed on the form, or they can be user-defined fields. Now, even within that, there are still some restrictions. So you've got the ability to set the label, set the field type, and set whether it's disabled or not. So whether it's just for sort of read-only information, or whether you're going to accept data into it. And it's also not on every form because there's a technical limitation with the way we've managed to do that, and that is that the form has to have an underlying dataset table. Some forms are populated by almost views of data that we don't get that are not coming from a table. So what I was going to show you is what I've done to add those two fields. I'll just maximize this screen. Is I've created in the user-defined column maintenance in Epicor, is I've created 4 new columns. The first one being the definition. And so I will circulate, I'll send it to Carmen and Mark, and they can distribute it, but I've got a little document on which ones can be customized and which ones can't be. A PO receipt is a good example because it can be. So there's strict naming conventions. They have to be, so I've got 2 columns, and each column has to have 4 entries in this screen. So the first one is defining the field name from that data set that you want to display. The second one is saying whether you want it disabled or not, so whether it's read-only information. Third one is the label that goes onto the screen, where we put an initial value of job num. And the fourth one is just the type of field, so it's a text field or it's a integer or whatever it is. And so I've got those 4 fields for the job number field, and then I've got the job sequence and the 4 fields that relate to job sequence with the reference to with the naming convention of EMW underscore col1 and the 4 values, and then col2. And that's all you need to do. You need to create these records in the user-defined column maintenance. You'll need to regenerate your data model. And then anywhere that raw data set is used in the handheld, those fields, there's nothing else you need to do in the handheld. Those fields just appear at the bottom of the form. Now, I just got this little screen here. So here's an example of some other screens that we've put some on. So this is a similar screen to what I was just showing you, but it's got 2 values, one that's flagged as read-only and one that is allowing values. And as I said, keeping in mind they can be existing fields in the Epicor dataset that aren't displayed on the form, or user-defined fields for that dataset. So that's an example of read-only and not read-only. And then here's an example when it's a list view, which is only read-only, but you can add fields which will just appear at the bottom. And obviously each one of these is going to get bigger, but will appear at the bottom of, I think, the 3 lines on that particular form standard, and we've added weight. But you could add a number of them. I don't believe there's any limit, obviously, but that section of the form is going to grow. And as I said earlier, one of the biggest challenges is managing the screen real estate. So that's what we've been able to achieve in this version. So hopefully you guys find that helpful and customers find that helpful while we're waiting for the full functionality of the Kinetic framework to allow for personalizations and customizations as we know it today. I'm not sure what their time frame on that is. But, so what else? That was really all I wanted to that I've got to show you today, other than to mention a couple of things that we're working on that will be more than likely just issued in dot releases over the coming weeks and months. And that is that if I go back into my settings and look at something like in receipts, one of the settings that's been here for a long time, that is this one here for require scan validation. For those of you who are not familiar with that, whilst the application does sort of line level validation, so if you're on a purchase order list and you scan a part that's not on that purchase order, it'll tell you that's not here. But you can also you can also, because you can drive the app manually, you could be physically taking receipt of part 1, 2, 3 and tap part 1, 2, 4 on the list of PO items and say, yes, I just received 5 of them, when you've actually received part 1, 2, 3. This requires scan validate. Basically says, even though you can drive the app manually, I'm not going to allow you to save that record until I've forced you to scan it to confirm that you're telling me that the part you've received is the same part that's on in this case, a PO. Now, we've got that same functionality on the outbound. This is the setting for the inbound. But what we are about to add into the product is similar scan validation for both lots and bins. So we've had a number of requests whereby, it's easy to select a lot from a list, or if you've got stock stored in multiple bins, select the bin that you're picking it from the list. But we're adding scan validation to force the user, determined by the company if they want to turn it on or not, but to force the user that they not only have to select they can't just select an item from the list. They're forced to scan it, make sure they're picking it from the right bin, or make sure that they've picked up the right lot number. So we're adding that functionality at the moment. And the other thing we're actively working on, and we're working with the dev team on, is languages. So we've got the ability to translate the application into languages. The first one we're working on is Spanish. And just to let everybody know where we're up to with that, is that because we're using the definitions in the Epicor language translation tables, and because of the way we have had to abbreviate some of the forms because of the screen real estate that we're managing, we're just working through. We can translate it into Spanish now, but it's only about 70% of the values, because the rest of the values we need to pre-populate into the Epicor database, because we've used words that don't exist in the database translation tables, or we've used abbreviations that don't exist. So we're just working with the guys on building that list out, so that all labels and headings and everything is translated. So they're two of the things that we're working on at the moment. That was about all I had to show you today. So, Carmen, are you there?
Thank you, Greg. Yes, I'm here. I don't see any questions on my Q&A. Do you have any that could have been directed to you?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, so we have time to answer your questions if you want to send them through the Q&A box. And I was going to ask about the languages, and that's great news that you're already working on Spanish, since we've had a lot of interest in LATAM. And I think a couple of sales even, so.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, that's...
Okay, so, yeah.
It's good. Yeah, there you go.
Brad jumped in. So he's asking, will document attachments work with DocStar?
I believe so. I think it depends on the document type that you configure. Personally, myself, I need to do a little bit more work playing around with that, get my own head around it, but I believe so, yes.
Thanks. Any other questions? Okay, see another one. It says, for any possible bugs, does this follow the same ERP process, problem creation, etc.?
Yes. Sorry, Carmen, what were you going to say?
No, go ahead. I was just going to ask if this was referring to, any like issues and like how they like bring support cases, etc.
Yeah, so same process as the standard Epicor product. So first and second line support are done through Epicor support, and then Epicor support will refer once they've done their work to confirm if they think it is a bug, and in fact, or a enhancement request. So that third line support will then come through to us.
Thanks. Last chance. Any more questions? No, I don't see any more questions. So this is being recorded, so we'll distribute it later if you want to watch it again or send it to a colleague. Greg, thank you so much for showing us all of the new stuff on Epicor Mobile Warehouse. And just remember, if you have any questions, you can reach out to Mark Kaminsky or myself, and we'll be able to help you.
No problem. Thanks, guys. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carmen.